Thank you for your continued support of this series, Why I Think Curse of Strahd is so good. Before we continue, you should know this contains spoilers. Although we won't be going into every minute detail of every location or gameplay element, it is important to be warned. Secondly, Curse of Strahd, even though written for a game that children play, due to the nature of the setting and the moral ambiguity of what's right and wrong in such a wretched place, viewer discretion is advised. You've gotten your fortune read, and now you have to fulfill your destiny with 3 items and an ally to defeat your undead captor. Can you gather everything you need before you're killed? Or worse, captured and damned for eternity? Madame Eva gives you your 5 readings from the Taraka deck, and the Fortunes of Ravenloft have sealed your destiny. The deck has told you where you'll meet Strahd in his castle, where the 3 items needed to defeat him are, and the ally that will help you. We will continue this series of why I think Curse of Strahd is such a great module with the first thing that I want to bring up today, and that is a mobile and watchful enemy. To give you some context, static final bosses at the end of the dungeon style enemies are fine for MMORPGs and other video games. However, RPGs, not just D&D, have suffered from this plague. It's been around since the beginning of the hobby. Even in 5th edition, modules like Tomb of Annihilation and Princes of the Apocalypse have a big bad evil guy hanging out at the end of the dungeon, and they barely move around. My homebrew campaigns suffer from this myself, so I'm not saying that I'm a perfect writer. In I6 Ravenloft, the Hickmans actually switched up the idea of a final boss fight at the end of a long dungeon, but gave the intelligent evil being the freedom to move around. Curse of Strahd continues this tradition by having Strahd move around Barovia. The PCs may encounter him laying under a tree, whistling while walking down a road, or even in his driverless horse carriage. The point is, the players meet him, and he may even entertain the idea of a fight with them at the early levels. He makes himself known to the players by hopping into their affairs and messing with them a lot. This idea is further explained in Strahd's location in his castle for a final showdown. Instead of being a giant grand hall playing a pipe organ or waiting in his royal chambers, he could be in the torture chambers or even one of the servants' quarters. The best part about all this is that Strahd is usually found in a place that the PCs least expect him to be. Well, why would he be in like a kitchen or a servant's lounge or even like a bathroom or something? It's such a good feature because it preys on the expectation on how a final boss fight should be handled. An intelligent mobile enemy is much more dangerous to the PCs than the static one waiting to be attacked. The paranoia it creates in players helps really keep the tensions high. And finding out where he can be in the 5th reading of the Fortunes of Ravenloft help that, but it also means that Strahd isn't someone that's just waiting to be killed. There are more than just these 3 magic items in Curse of Strahd, but since these are the ones that are used for the Fortunes of Ravenloft and used to help defeat Strahd, these are what I'm going to discuss. The Tome of Strahd is an odd feature, and if I could change anything about this game, it would be this particular item. I'll try to discuss it a little bit more in the homebrew for Curse of Strahd video, but this item is specifically only for atmosphere and world building. The Tome of Strahd doesn't give much in the way of helping defeat him, only his thoughts and horrors. It's an item I hope my players get either second or last, because I don't want them to believe that all the items are useless, and to keep searching. I'm not the only one who thinks this way. The Curse of Strahd subreddit has many different revised Tome of Strahd entries to make it much more helpful and not just roleplay fodder. The Sun Sword is very important in your arsenal to help defeat Strahd. A lot of people think that it's the best thing that you would get to help defeat Strahd, though I will argue against that. The Sun Sword is what used to be Sergei's sword, Strahd's brother. And after he died, Strahd had a wizard attempt to destroy the magical sentient weapon, but the wizard's apprentice stole the hilt and was found dead in the Svalich woods, mutilated, but with no hilt in sight. The wizard lied to Strahd and said it was destroyed. It has a Sunblade profile, meaning it gets a +2 to hit and a +2 to damage, plus it has its versatile trait. It deals radiant damage instead of slashing, and undead take an extra d8 radiant damage when hit with it. It's chaotic good, and it wants nothing but to kill Strahd. If you don't have a martial weapon user in your party, you can make the weapon a reskinned simple weapon. The Holy Symbol of Ravenkind is a legendary item, and in my personal opinion, the most important item to have when defeating Strahd. The Sun Sword usually gets all the credit, but hear me out. Legend has it, a paladin named Vistana was blessed with this symbol by an angel that appeared to her as a raven. She used this holy symbol to destroy vampires until she herself died, and it was lost in Barovia. This symbol has the ability to cast a modified hold spell, specifically Hold Vampire. It has the ability to turn undead and create sunlight, a vampire's dreaded weakness. It is important to have to keep all of the hordes of undead enemies at bay. There are 21 options for the Taraka reading about Strahd's enemies who will be your crucial ally. One of those options is no ally, so technically there are actually 20 allies the PCs can have. All of these allies have at least a cool feature or fact about them, and they give you mechanical inspiration in your battle with Strahd. This video will be very long if I went into each and every one of them in depth, but since I believe the thoughtfully written NPCs in Curse of Strahd make it so memorable, I'd go over the NPCs in detail that will come up in gameplay more than once or twice, and have more of a recurring role than just a sideline support role. One final note, as I said in my last video, whichever of these 20 allies helps you drastically changes roleplay options within the game, meaning that each playthrough can be different based on which ally is chosen to help you. Ismark Kailanovich, aka Ismark the Lesser, is a young man in Barovia, son of the Burgomaster, or as the players that find out, the late Burgomaster. He is introduced as a quiet patron of the Blood of the Vine Tavern in Barovia. If the PCs are brought to Barovia via the Plea for Help adventure hook, Ismark can look over the letter and see that the writing is definitely not of his father's hand. You see, Ismark's father has been dead for 10 days. Due to wolves and other monsters trying to break into their boarded and beaten house, his father just couldn't take it anymore and he had a heart attack. The sad thing is that Ismark and his sister Irina cannot bury their father under the constant assault of Strahd's minions. So the Burgomaster's coffin is in the mansion living room, and his body is rotting. Ismark's overall plan is to get Irina to the town of Kresk, which he believes to be the safest town in all of Barovia. Whether the PCs agree to help him or not, he takes over watching his adopted sister, and overcoming the feeling of being less than a man, he brings Irina to Kresk. If the PC's destiny makes him their ally, well, he will do whatever it takes to defeat Strahd and prove not only to the PCs, but to himself, that he is more than just a young man living in the wake of his father's shadow. Irina Koliana is Ismark's sister. She was adopted by the Burgomaster, and interestingly enough, she is a lost soul in Barovia. She is actually a reincarnation of sorts of Strahd's true love, Tatiana. Strahd has fed on Irina and schemes to make her his vampire bride, basically because he recognizes Tatiana in Irina. He sends his minions to assault her house, and this is what kills the Burgomaster because he has the heart attack from dealing with all of this stress. But Irina has very little recollection of Strahd, but she knows that she's not safe, and she trusts her stepbrother to get her to Kresk. The ironic part of all this is that Irina is actually badass. She's a fighter and is more useful than her brother. If she is the chosen one in that PC's fate, she's a very welcome PC ally to have, but the PCs will have to keep an eye on her and themselves as Strahd doubles down his efforts in getting the PCs away from her. There is an optional scene in Kresk where Irina sees Sergei and realizes who she actually is. The PCs can mess this up and pull her away from the vision of Sergei, or let her be safe with him, eliminating her as a loose end. A young girl watches her parents steal a man's son to sell to a vampire who is not Strahd. Old enough to understand the implications, she was heartbroken to see him beg her Vistani parents for his location. She was amazed at his mercy, as they had sold his son to become a vampire spawn, and the man did not kill her parents. He spared them as he did not want to cause more pain in the world. Esmeralda ran away and found this man, begging to help him search for his son. The man did not recognize her, and told her the tragic story of how he had to slay his son who was begging for mercy. She was horrified and swore to help vanquish all that goes bump in the night. After working together and finally parting ways, Esmeralda heard that this man was going to Barovia to put an end to the king of all vampires. She decided to come to Barovia and help him, but knowing he'd berate her for putting herself in danger, she hid from him, helping him behind the scenes. She will help the PCs in ways they don't know. If the PCs roll a random encounter, it's possible that they'll never have it because Esmeralda had their back. If the PC's fate makes her their ally, she's very helpful as she has some experience killing the undead. A circus ringleader is what he goes by. The people of Vallaki gather around to hear his stories from another land. Rictavio is an eccentric half-elf who is often mistaken for a Vistani. Rudolf van Richten is more than meets the eye. You see, Rictavio married a woman, and had a son, who was stolen by a group who called themselves the Vistani. They sold his son as a slave to a vampire lord, and in his deep anger and sadness, decided that the Vistani needed to live, as he didn't want any blood on his hands, nor did he want to orphan the little girl that was witnessing the conversation. He found his son. The vampire had already turned him into a vampire spawn. His son begged and pleaded in agony. The pain of being a vampire spawn was too much, and Rictavio did what a loving father would have to do. He killed his son to end his pain. The vampire lord, furious with this, found Rictavio's wife and slaughtered her with no remorse. His son killed by Rictavio, and now his wife slayed by this vampire. The pain had just become too much, and he decided to make sure that no one ever had to feel what he felt. He started hunting all the evil, starting with the vampire lord, and after teaching his ways to continue the good fight to a young woman named Esmeralda, he decided that his final act would be to destroy the most powerful vampire, Strahd von Zarovich. Brictavio is going to attempt to kill Strahd no matter what, but if the PCs have him as their fortunate ally, he's amazing to have on their side. Plus, the PCs get to learn this interesting backstory about him, and gives them even more drive to kill Strahd. I just gave you a synopsis on 4 NPCs. The reason I enjoy Curse of Strahd so much is because these 4 NPCs are worth more to me than the dozens of others I've met in other adventures. My heart aches for all of these NPCs. I can't directly relate to them all, but I can feel their pain, and it drives me as the player and the DM to tell a better story, because I, the player, feel emotionally invested in it now. I hope you can understand just how important having a well thought out NPC can impact the story, not just as a player character, but as the players themselves. You've collected all the items and gained your ally. Now it's time to enter one of the most haunting dungeons of all time. Stay tuned for the next episode where we explore one of D&D's most iconic dungeons, Castle Ravenloft.